Light Touch is a non-medical wellness device designed to support calm, regulation, and more restful sleep in the midst of everyday stress. For first responders and other high-stress professionals, it offers a simple way to support steadier functioning, recovery, and overall well-being. To learn more, check out episode 317 or visit mylighttouch.com. You train for the threats you can see, but what about the ones you can't? United Diagnostic Services brings hospital-grade diagnostic technology directly to first responder agencies, making early detection of cardiovascular disease and cancer more accessible than ever. UDS provides comprehensive early detection programs using advanced ultrasound, CT calcium scoring, stress echoes, and innovative blood panels to identify potential health risks long before symptoms appear. It's proactive, on-site, and built specifically for those who serve. Early detection saves lives and careers. Learn more at udshealth.com. The views and opinions expressed by the host and guests of this show do not represent their employing agency, department, or organization. All information should be regarded as anecdotal, contextual, and educational, and should not be misinterpreted as legal or medical advice. Welcome to Blue Grit Radio, the podcast that explores making better cops for a better community. I'm your host, Eric Tung. I've been an active police officer since 2007. We will dive into the aspects of police culture, health and wellness, leadership, and mindset. You'll hear from experts not only from policing, but all industries as they relate to being our best with purpose, passion, and positivity. Join me as we share stories, lessons, and advice so we can all be better for ourselves, our teams, our families, and our communities. All right, everyone, welcome back to the show. I'm really excited to feature the guest today. I hopped on his podcast and featured actually that conversation on this show. So if you're an avid listener, you may have already heard it. If you haven't, go back to episode 288. We talk about first responder careers declining. Like, why is that? What are we seeing from a very different perspectives, but overlapping purposes and insights? And so without further, I have Jon Vargas from the Grab Lives podcast on the show today. Jon, thanks for joining us, man.
Thank you, brother, for having me on. Appreciate you.
Yeah, absolutely. I really love featuring the type of perspectives that I'm sure we'll cross over into today. And when we're bouncing around some ideas, really thinking about what first responders and just general public can get more of and can benefit from. And a lot of that is a continual theme that we circle around, which is like purpose and like staying positive and like trying to move through life and do the best we can, although we have really arduous circumstances. And generated from some of the things that you put out and some of the conversations we had, I had this thought just to kind of visit this theme of unliving. Like, those are just going through life and they're not lit up. They're not living with joy, with purpose. And I think that's even for first responders that do this very archetypical, purposeful, important, crucial job. That's why they came in, but then they get sucked into the grind and the burnout and whatever comes with that. So just to kick things off, this quote, many of you may have heard or read it before, but many people die at 25 and aren't buried until they're 75. And that's Benjamin Franklin. Right. And then this other quote I'll feature as well. To live is the rarest thing in the world. Most people exist, and that is all. Oscar Wilde. So as I open it up to that and present those quotes, what kicks up for you, Jon?
I'm under the impression we see about 3% of reality. Like, if in each room, there's so much that we don't see, we don't realize. So most of our adaptation to that is from ignorance. So like the best thing we can do is to accept that we're all ignorant in some sense, shape or form, and to like move forward through a way of surrender, humility, and like respecting the world we're in and gaining relationship with it. Like, most of what I've succumbed to understand is that a lot of what we do is just a lack of connection, lack of communication, and a lack of relationship to life and relationship to reality. And I think part of what you're saying is people have, lost translation through life. It's just life. And we just have to uh, respect that. And then most of our reality we've created in our heads is not matching up with what's going on. And so when we come to that realization, it can be painful. And, I think that pain you're never going to run away from pain. Like it's just going to exist, So I think over time, we have to come back to fundamental truths, fundamental values. Those things help when we go back to those basics. And I think a lot of times we're looking for solutions to rid us from pain, but we're not going back to fundamentals. And when you speak about someone going through life and basically not living the life they want to live through a sense of purpose, it's like the thing for me, like in first responder world, is nihilistic collapse. And a nihilistic collapse is you've come to a point in your life where you just lost meaning, and a lot of it can come through crisis, and you've lost some faith in your beliefs and your reasoning for like anything, And I think that happens when you trip a breaker within yourself. You've processed and analyzed everything at a logical standpoint to the point where you've tripped that breaker, and now you've collapsed inwardly, and that is an inner crisis where loss of motivation or direction is through emotional detachment. You've had some cynicism towards your goals in life, your relationships, your institutions that you're working with, and you've now found yourself finding it difficult to make decisions on all options that are on the board, and everything becomes equally meaningless. And maybe that answers your question. I don't know if it does.
It does, and it follows up a lot more questions. You said a lot. Some of the things that I definitely agree with, and some of the things I'm really curious about, because I'm like, oh, what do you mean by that? And I think I get where you're going, but let's just pause and kind of go back. So when you say we see very little, there's a lot of different directions I would agree and want to take it from there. Do you think that that's like a starting point for a lot of us as young individuals or young adults coming into the job like this, or even like we actually say that in emergency services, right? Like I'm a cop, you're a firefighter, we've both been doing it for a while on our own. And a lot of times when you see the hurt and the pain and the destruction, the violence and the calamity out there, and you interact with folks that fortunately, luckily, don't see all that at the volume we do, and generally that does yield this cynicism and this nihilism of like, you don't get it. You don't know who's out there. You don't know who's out there to hurt people and what's happening out there. You just see headlines, and sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad. And you just kind of go about your day. Is that a part of what you're thinking about?
Well, I think the nihilistic collapse is a symptom of like a false scaffolding around obsessive control. And in our world, as a first responder, we have to have some type of scaffolding to control chaos because that's what we're involved in. That's why we have these pecking order. That's why we have, an incident command system through large incidents to bring some type of control within that chaos.
Yeah,
And
order,
so
right?
we go through all the training and that structure that a person builds internally with these things like rules, routines, monitoring everything. They learn a sense of perfectionism, constant planning, information gathering, right, from your world around you. Those things are great. However, people lose sight on how they start to become obsessive with those things because they work for a certain amount of things in their life, but it doesn't work really well with the relationships. Doesn't really work really well with parenting. It
Definitely not.
can some degree, right? You have like you got to put the kid down for a nap and like those things, right? But over time, it creates a sense of hypervigilance, and that's really been a common theme within the first responder world. But it's expensive. These symptoms are expensive to the point where you trip that breaker, now you're in nihilistic collapse, then you're circling the drain. And there's not much of people knowing how to pick this stuff apart because it's confusing, and it's strange because we don't fully understand how we become obsessive about this stuff, and it starts running our life. And
Yeah.
I think why it's expensive is because uh, there's no true sense of safety. Like that's not real. We try to help people and say, hey, you got to feel safe in your body. You got to feel safe in your environment to heal. But that's not inherently true. In life, you will never find a sense of safety. And so for us, for someone who's recovering from addiction or recovering from a crisis, they begin to start creating a bubble within themselves. How do I prevent pain forever? You can't. It's not possible. And so like what's reasonable is starting to become adaptable to your environment. And that's really what we're good at. We are adaptable to every single situation and circumstance. Um, but the solution is not really becoming absolute fearless, perfectly healed, or like permanently safe. It's learning to develop like a nervous system and an inner coherence with connection to life and relationship to life. It's more about relationship based living.
Yeah. You said a lot and it's really deep. And so I'm going to try to break this down in a way that and I really love your metaphors too because they're having me like kind of grapple with these ideas in a fresh, crisp way. One of the things that I think I'll circle around that kicks up for me when you're talking about this false sense of security, I call it at times this illusion of control, right? Like fire service or police, whatever, you get the 911 call, you get some basic info, and you start rolling, right? You start anticipating all the resources you may want or need, and you start kicking up these things. Maybe you don't even need them, but you're going to get them rolling, right? So in your context, it might be, hey, like an extra ladder truck. And in my context, it might be like, well, the guy might have left on foot, so let's kick up the canine, right? Let's just get someone rolling from somewhere in the county. I don't know how long it'll take. We might cancel them when they're halfway there, right? But we start to build up these layers of response and contingencies, thinking that we can control the situation. But in truth, we're fully reactive, right? Like we only get the little brass tacks that's offered to us, and we use our imagination and we figure out where to go from there. And oftentimes, even with all this planning, there's those sayings like, the plan only survives no plan survives first contact, and then you have to revamp. And so again, like as John's saying, it's it's this illusion of control. And a lot of the times it works out well because we study, we train, we know what types of patterns are happening. But then when we apply them to our own lives and homes, it's absolutely not plausible and it's also inappropriate, right? And if I'm trying to say like, well, my wife needs to talk to me, but it might be to figure out groceries or who's picking up our kiddo, or it might be to, tell me she's serving me with divorce paperwork. If I go in with all those potentials, we're not setting up for a good relationship or a good conversation or anything in between. Um, and then even when you're talking about like the cynicism from the collapse, you call it this, the tripping the breaker. I love that. I haven't heard it that way, but it's like because we don't have control, we do put a lot of faith, a lot of belief in our systems, and systems are super fallible, as we know. Um, but when we put so much faith in our systems, like this is not to get political, this is just to draw uh, an image, but like our government or our governmental leaders, and we find out they're fallible, then we are shattered, right? Our paradigm, our perception of things is just completely in the tank. But that happens too with our organizations and our leadership. And this is not to throw shade at quote unquote leadership, but they are people. And so when they mess up and we put too much faith in them and what they say and their abilities, and we're left feeling like empty, and then we can't trust the system. Now we don't believe in the organization, all these things, it can absolutely lead to that administrative betrayal feeling, a different level of burnout. And then as you so well illustrate, like that cynicism, right? Because that I love that. Again, that other metaphor, scaffolding, right? That framework is collapsed. And so where are you left? You're kind of left in the ruins, in the rubble under it.
Mm. Yeah, it's painful when that collapses, but it's bound to collapse for every single human being, and it shows up through either disease, illness, injury, or loss for some reason. Because that anything that is supporting a system that is not in true fulfillment with natural order or universal law, it's going to collapse. It has to. I mean, look at the world right now. We're going through a huge upheaval globally. Every system that is not honoring this planet, is not honoring humanity, must collapse at some point. And we watch the cycles of it happen through humanity over time. And we keep repeating the same thing over and over and over and over again. Through Rome, through all this stuff, through history, we watch it, we learn it in school, in grade school, and yet we fail to find some type of solution as as a humanitarian race to see what we can do. And people are experiencing a ton of fear with what AI is going to do to everything. You know, everyone's talking. It's a big hot topic. It's a buzzword. However, our fundamentals are still, not there in a sense as a collective. And I'm speaking for us who respond to everything, and we experience our own reality that's completely different to the average person. And for us, we are these warriors, and available for everything and anything. And for us to do our own inner work and to discover like the the fundamentals of our own identities, and then the way we've put so much fixed expectations on other things, it can be harmful and damaging. And so to kind of break this stuff apart and give it context, it gives people like a sense of relief. Like, oh my God, like this kind of makes sense, and it makes people feel like they're not going crazy at the same time because they're all experiencing the same internal conflict. And so I hope to help people see how they can get past this inner civil war they're experiencing and come back to realize like the conditionings they've had through work and how that's, just information embedded into the nervous system. And when I speak on on tripping the breaker, that's a version of electricity, right? So we're electrical beings, and like our nervous system is a conduit of electricity. And so most of our life is embedded into an electrical voltage that we're holding. And so a lot of times people don't understand what's going on there, but it affects our bodies, it affects our consciousness, it affects our hearts, affects our overall health, our biology. And it's a very strange thing to perceive, but it's really essential to kind of come to grips with, because when you pay attention to those things, then you realize how jacked up your nervous system really is. And you realize
Hmm.
how jacked up and ungrounded you really are. And I think most of us have a general functional anxiety through hypervigilance, and like that's
Yeah.
just like a hard thing to live with when you're at home.
Yeah. I want to focus on that. I mean, there's a lot I want to go back to, but I want to focus on that phrase right there, like that functional anxiety. Like we are hyper focused, we're hyper vigilant on what's going to happen, what might happen, and all these things. And there, like anything, there is a healthy version of that to prepare and a tool, especially for our jobs. Like if you just go in, like, I don't know what's going to happen, let's just see and find out. Life's an adventure. Yeah, we probably won't be super successful in addressing the emergency situation. Um, but if we overinflate and overinvest in that, then for sure it can go out of balance. And I think it's what a lot of what you're saying, and I know it. We're going deep, and I love it. I know that it's going to have some people leaning toward and some people leaning away. That's like anything. But I also like, as much as you say, the logical approach and the maybe the overemphasis on logic and like the cognitive is what I think of, and how that can lead to these things. I think logic is also, we can zoom out, take a breath, take a pause, and we can look at things logically, right? Like a lot of this like grounding, and that can have people thinking, man, this is really woo, and he's talking about consciousness and the shared collective. But let's think about it this way. And this is what's helped me, because I definitely have not always felt or believed this way. And a lot of me chooses to believe this way these days. But let's look at let's say the aspect of like this shared collective like energy. We'll call it that for now. So logically, let's just recognize, if I distrust everybody around me in my at work in uniform and in my like normal day-to-day community, then I'm going to be apprehensive. I'm going to keep distance physically, emotionally. I'm going to keep space. I'm going to be less likely to extend trust. And then what will I get in return? I will get more of that, right? I will basically be breeding it. And I'm not saying just blindly trust everyone, but if I'm not willing to meet halfway, then I'm not going to build relationship. I'm not going to build community. And so that's like a way that I've thought about it in the last few years when I started essentially trying to look at things more positively, because I definitely went through different bouts of the cynicism and the nihilism. And for those that are newer to these concepts, like my layman's definition would be like cynicism is like looking at everything like there's something wrong with it. And
Mhm.
nihilism, I feel, is a lot of times more dangerous because it's just like apathetic. You're like, there's no point to anything. Like there's like just F it, right? And we can see how even the cynical people can get really impassioned, and they still have ideas and answers, and there might be some anger and some bite to it. But a lot of
Mhm.
times those cynical people in our organizations and maybe our families and communities, like they're very invested. They really want some change, and they're willing to, speak up and, do something for it oftentimes.
Yeah, I mean, when I mention some of these things, I do them on purpose. Like collective consciousness and like a sense of groundedness. But people take it way too far when they've heard it from other individuals, like a yoga teacher or something like that. But
Hmm.
when I say them, I'm relating them to like a fundamental value. Like to be grounded is like to be centered within yourself. You're not overthinking, you're not overanalyzing. Like you're not grounded if you're experiencing those realities you're experiencing. And it's interesting because I get this all the time at work, and I like say these words, they're triggers for them because it threatens something around that they're not experiencing or they're not working on. And that's usually what that comes from. They see it as a threat rather than like something to like actually lean into.
Yeah, I'm
And
curious. Since you brought that up, like with colleagues or any folks like curious and leaning in, because as well as, do you think some of that's because like John's using these big deep words, these spiritual, soul centric concepts, and he's judging me because I just want to play Xbox and eat my snacks. Like, do you think there's elements of that as well?
yeah, because a lot of things when I say things, I have intention around it, and the intention around it is to have people question themselves, and not to do it through like an estranged way, more so to have people like just have little questions around things, and then like see maybe some inner guidance they can have by following up that thread that they can pull,
Hmm.
and it's just funny to watch when I do that, and it becomes it depends on each individual, there, and especially generations that are different too. Like there's age gaps that I work with at the firehouse and things like that, and some people lean into it, some people don't. They just have a hard time grasping the concept, but I can break it down for someone. It becomes more meaningful over time. And based on what you're saying too, like that cynicism and the nihilistic collapse, everyone's going to experience that. Everyone's going to go through that in their career because we we just have a hard time dealing with the call volume and experiencing life outside of work. It's going to happen. I promise you this. And people come to the point where of being completely numb, and I know what that feels like. And it's just a callousness over time, and that callousness just gets hardened, 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 hardened until when? Until it starts to crack. At some point, it will crack, and it comes to the point of like acknowledging the storm. Like, yeah, you have two perspectives. It's like I control the storm. Okay, well, can you control the storm? Not really. And then I give up in the storm. Like, just let the storm take me. Whatever. I'm just gonna die.
Capsize,
And I
yeah,
can learn to
yeah.
stand in changing weather is really where we want to be. It's a state of coherence.
Yeah, that's a great metaphor. Again, man, the imagery, I love it. But yeah, the storm. So people think that they can brave it and just like out muscle it, and then you're gonna have. I'm not a mariner by trade, right? But like your mass, your rudder, all those stuff's gonna snap. Like your hull's gonna crack and break. Or like a seasoned, seafarer is going to go with the storm. Like right, they're gonna maneuver and read the weather. And yes, there might be a little bit of like, Jesus take the wheel and but not just this passivity, right? The passivity would just get you like flopped over and you're overboard, and that wasn't the goal either, right? I'll share a couple examples that personally, because I do when I do get feedback, a lot of it is like, hey, like I appreciate the personal example because it helps illustrate it, but also like is signaling some level of vulnerability. But when you're describing some of these things of like, the nihilistic, shoot, what is it? What's that phrase again?
Nihilistic collapse.
Yeah, yeah. So like a couple examples, like in my 30s, I think for my circles at work and outside of work, people are like, man, you're like a health freak or whatever, right? So I felt like I was doing all the things, and I've actually integrated this into training curriculum. Uh, and yeah, I felt like I was doing all the right things, right? Eating right, working out, etc. However, like my hormones were just getting driven into the ground because of cortisol and stress and doing too many of all the quote unquote cool high speed things. Um, and there's a lot of like just this like WTF, and I don't want to say like why me, but like this frustration, like I was doing all the things. Why can't I sleep? Why can't I whatever? And it's because of all the things I said, right? Like these contributing factors. Um, but ultimately, what I needed to grapple with, and it took me a while. It took me years. Like I wasn't just like gonna stop deadlifting whatever I was deadlifting multiple times a week. It took me a lot of forced humility to release, right? And that word, that release, is a really poignant word for me because it's like you can't keep doing all the things and expect different results. Like you have to come to grapple and to grips with that. And so recognizing that what I really needed was not the things I wanted and not the things I wanted to do. And a lot of times it's really hard to do that. And I'm going to keep having examples of that. Like not super duper long ago, I felt like I was just really dialed in, like career, everything was going great, health pretty good, family life really good, relationships with my daughter great, blue grit awesome. And so I'm just like, man, I'm just like freaking crushing it. And then I feel like this distance communicating with my wife, and she's like, you just haven't been like checking in on me. And then I felt like, again, that like that breaker snapped. I was like, I thought I was crushing everything, but she's right. Like I wasn't giving her like the revved up version of me, like when someone at work calls me or when I, get home, checking in with my daughter. Once my daughter's in bed, I'm just kind of like tired, right? And so it's not to blame or shame myself, but it is to recognize like I think a lot of times that shutdown comes from this natural defensiveness of like thought I was doing everything right, but you're challenging my paradigm now, right? You're challenging my narrative that I thought was all clean and cookie cutter in a box, kind of like maybe your peers at the firehouse just saying like when they hear this concept, whether it's a part of shadow or something, it kind of kicks up, like triggers something within them, not because you're trying to make them uncomfortable or ashamed or feel judged, but you're trying to elicit and nudge this quote unquote healthy challenge, I would say, to think deeper and like, is their life really serving them and how they're looking at life and concepts. And there's a lot of examples of that beyond what you're talking about. A lot of times that is literally just like, how are we being constructive? How are we like relating to each other on a team, like leadership stuff? I think that there's a lot of parallels there.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, then life is life, right? And for you to go through these things and learning to adapt to your spouse, that's just life. And that's just like there's no blame or shame with that. It's like it's okay to make mistakes. Sometimes it's just we just have to just retreat a little bit and then reconstruct our values again, and then just and move forward. And so a lot of times I think it's the meaning we place behind things and the reactions we have internally. That's what we have to look at. Like I just had a friend recently reach out to me and just tell me he started drinking again after being sober. And I was like, had so much shame and blame around it. And I was like, hey, the substance is not the problem. It's your relationship to yourself around the shame and the blame. Go to that first. That's really the clue. It's not the drinking. Like everyone goes to that stuff and they say that's the problem. It's not that it's our relationship to life that we have to reconstruct. Reconstruct our identities around things, the way we identify with stuff. Because and you can do all the cold plunging, all the dieting, all the deadlifts and everything with your diet. At some point, you will never be fully healthy unless you free your mind. And that's the truth because our biology is a reflection of our psychology. It's an inner game. And so when you start to really test yourself, you're gonna come around the corner and have the same lesson over and over, and like, wait, I just saw that lesson last week, or I saw that lesson last year. Now it's time to just go back to the drawing board and see why did this cycle repeat itself. And so we work in cycles, we work in patterns, we work in these ways that if unless we put attention on it, we will still repeat the same thing over and over. And to the regular monk, he'll say that's karma. To the quantum physicists, he'll say that's quantum probability. So all these people have some type of language around these things, but through our humanness, it's just life,
Hmm.
But we have to have some type of way of dismounting these false identities, these false versions of ourselves that we've conditioned and constructed for since birth.
Yeah, yeah. And earlier you were talking about how pain prevention is. I forget exactly how you open it up, but my thought from that is like, yeah, we can't avoid pain. I mean, we can, but it doesn't fix anything, and if anything, it makes it worse. It festers, right? And like enduring and working through and mitigating the pain is essentially like how we overcome adversity, how we build resilience or this anti-fragility. And so use terminology like that, it almost makes me feel, connecting with what you just said, is when we try to avoid pain, either just general avoidance or acting like it doesn't exist, acting like the issue isn't there, then we are dooming ourselves to repeat these patterns. And we're very successful in our jobs because of pattern recognition, right? Like someone's blading away and reaching their pockets. That might be danger. So I'm going to move this way and dress it with this tool that keeps us safe and alive. You know, that are you familiar with Gary Klein's Sources of Power, that book? It's on decision making, and I'll just like really quickly illustrate. He did a lot of studies on firefighters because they document and they have plans and contingencies that are really favorable to kind of after action. Um, and there was this one story of this like fire. I want to say bat chief or someone like of a substantial rank, but he was at the structure. They were at the structure fire, and they kept trying to address it, and they weren't getting the I suppose the feedback that they expected. And so he got this. He called it like a sixth sense, like a gut instinct. He said, "Everyone, get out of there right now." And they all pulled out, and then the whole thing collapsed. And they're basically addressing this rambler they thought was just a one story, but there was this basement, this full basement that they had no visual indicators of. But when they asked him, like, why did you ask everyone to come out? He was like, I just had this, sick feeling. But truly, when they like analyzed that more in situations like it was because they were not getting the expected feedback, like how they were addressing the fire, fighting the fire. It should have done different things. It should have like lessened or what have you. I'm not a firefighter, clearly. Um, but I think that there's so many like powerful comparisons to like life. But are we paying attention to those things, or are we? I mean, man, the archetypical thing is like people that just say that they're doomed for relationships, right? They always go after like the person, like it's the bad boy or the crazy gal or whatever, right? Like, but if we're truly trying to take pause and reflect, like, are we prepping and like arming ourselves to be aware of these patterns and then disrupt them in the ways that are going to serve us?
Yeah, I mean it's amazing to see what we do on these fire grounds, and like and what the work you do as well. Because sometimes shit just happens, and that's just the case. When we have to just know that we all chose these types of careers because there's an inherent danger to it, and we're willing to throw ourselves into that world. And like that chief, like who's deciding something based off gut instinct, like that's something to follow, and that's something to practice because there's something beyond logic that we can use to our natural ability. And then like, but those things like the nihilism and the obsessive control, those quiet down those natural instincts. And when we're in flow state, that's when those natural instincts start to evolve and transform themselves into these greater abilities that we can actually use. And so when you release control around those two topics, right? Obsessive control and nihilistic collapse. That's where you want to look into, cue in into why you do those things, and then how can you chip away at releasing those attributes within your internal matrix. And when we're deciding to just work within this structured work we do, it's just okay. We need that, but there's also a sense of balance that is required with it. And but when we just overuse something, it's just like it's gonna lift an upheaval of something else within yourself and within your life. So, and this just goes within my own personal life. Like when I come home from work, I know I'm in this vibration, of like wanting to control everything. I come to the house, I'm like, hey, we need this, we need that, and it's like I'm realizing I'm exhausting everyone in the room,
Yeah.
and so I take a step back and like it's okay. I made a mistake,
Yeah.
and I have to shift that. So that's
You're
like,
well-meaning, right? And it's
yeah,
like, giving some grace at the same time, like, bro, you haven't been here. Cool, we've been functioning without you. We're doing fine.
exactly.
Yeah.
So that's where it's at, right? It's not the it's the inner conversation we have with ourselves to pay attention to. And I used to just punish myself, man, all the time with, if I made a mistake, like just coming home and being an asshole, and just I would punish myself saying, man, why did I do that? And like I would be in the midst of that and it would ruin my day. I wouldn't do anything that whole day and I would still be exhausted because of what's controlling my behavior, what's controlling my life. And so that's really where it's at, is just seeing our relationship to self, a relationship to like our inner circle and like those we truly care about.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think for those that are listening in, they're like, okay, this is making sense. Or maybe people were with us the whole time, like, yeah, okay, like, tell me more. What things, you kind of gave the example of like coming home a little, like, not hot, but like, engaged, like this tension, right? Like,
Mm.
what things do you recommend people start thinking about if they actually are recognizing what we're talking about is something that they are visiting frequently in the space they're living in?
I've had some ways to bring solutions to things. A lot of people come to me and like my goal when I help people is like I try to take 1% of their pain away. If I can do that, then I'm doing a really good job. And a lot of the problem I have with like the first responder mental health awareness thing, it's like we just have a lot of labels around things and not much of like solutions. Right. You have like a woman, a psychologist come to like a big mental health convention thing around your department and she'll say, hey, you guys got to meditate. Everyone's looking at each other like, come on, man, like stop this. You know what I mean?
Mhm. Mhm.
Stop this nonsense. And so I really look to find solutions because I've done things that I've worked on within my own self, things that have worked for me. And so, like, always go to your inner world. Your inner world is going to become a reflection of the outer world. That's just a fact. And if you don't recognize that, then you're going to still repeat the same cycles over and over. So, like, one of the things is stop making certainty a requirement for peace. And like things like I'll relax when everything's resolved. That's not ever gonna happen. I'm
Mm,
sorry. And so that's where the obsessive control starts to kind of upheaval your life and de-shovel you. So I
yeah.
thought something that's really helpful with that one is I can experience I can experience incomplete information and still remain present. Because we feel like we always need all the information in order to like make a decision. Sometimes you don't need that. You can just be present within what you've been given, and that's just okay. Just accept that reality. Um, Building trust and adaptation, not prediction. So, like a lot of what we've been talking about is an act of mistrust within yourself, mistrust within your environment. It's just a lack of trust. So, to me, I've always said trust is the key to the universe. It absolutely is. And so building trust takes time. It really does. But it's through adaptation. It's not through prediction because you will never predict trust, or you'll never predict your world
Yeah.
um, with a relationship with conditional trust. It's unconditional. It's always
Yeah.
moving. It's always in flux. Um, Re-enter your life gradually if collapse has happened. So if you go through an internal collapse, don't just try to hit the weight room and just like go hard on everything. You with that shutdown, you got to re-enter everything slowly. And that's really hard for people when they're, been accustomed to, just being an extreme athlete. Most of us have come into these careers being extreme athletes. But you have to learn to just go for a walk and get some sunlight, have conversations with people you love, being creative, engaging with some type of small microdoses of purpose, not being like, oh, I'm going to go try to become a captain or a sergeant or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
It's like these things you're not ready for that yet. Come back to embodiment, helping others, meaningful change in your life. These small things are valuable when you're reentering life with that tripping that breaker. It just happens. Um, and letting the body experience safety directly. So like what that sounds like is like coming back to breath. And people talk about breath work, but they don't really understand it. It's like paying attention to your breath. Most of us are always breathing with shallowly within our chest. And biologically, that's just not good. You're messing with the pH balance within your blood when you're breathing that way. Easy movement and stillness without panic. Like a lot of members I work with, they cannot be still within for like 5 minutes.
Yeah.
They start panicking. Resting without guilt. Like these things, these are moments of safety within the body that no one teaches about because they seem so simple, but they're not. They're fundamental.
Yeah.
And my last thing I like bringing to people is accepting vulnerability as a cost of being alive. And what that sounds like to others is to love is vulnerable, to care is vulnerable, to dream is vulnerable, to live fully is vulnerable. And those vulnerabilities create and open up a portal within our lives to really have some substantial change. When we let down the armor, we relinquish the chains we put ourselves, we chained ourselves to, and we start to live fully. But that comes with vulnerability. It comes with a sense of openness. It comes with a sense of trust.
Yeah. I love it, man. You're just nailing all these points. And I really encourage people to maybe rewind back a couple of minutes and listen to these back. But I took some notes, and I think that, to kind of summarize and revisit them with a little bit of a different take or just an add-on take would be, yes, like a lot of this is because whether you came in as like an athlete or you came in like, there clearly is a high rev culture that we're in of like doing, responding, reacting. And the pause is really uncomfortable. Like today in society, we cannot be bored. We cannot be bothered with being bored. We are constantly stimulated and self-stimulating with our phones and all this stuff. There's studies that literally have like people sitting in a room and they can either sit in silence or they can like shock themselves. And so many people, as you guessed it, like you're picturing dudes, but it's just people, mostly dudes, I'm sure. But just shocking themselves with a little electrical probe because it's helping them like have something to do, which is, really fascinating and sad at the same time. But in anecdote or antidote to the hustle grind culture that we're getting fed, we're already doing a hard, like high paced job. Like take pause, right? And so I love how you recognize and help people recognize the small wins, right? Like 1% better. And I even like a lot of the themes I'm hearing, as far as like expectations, right? When we expect and we put this thing on this pedestal, it might be an actual promotion, right? Hey, I'm going to make a difference in my organization, my career, in the world. I'm going to promote. Like you're attaching this label and this rank that I'm not saying it's not important, and it's very important and meaningful to some people, and you can do a lot of good with it oftentimes, but it can't be the thing. It can't, like the external can't be the thing. If you want to go out and like mentor and be a fixture in the community and a leader and demonstrate through your values and service, like you don't require any rank or job to do that. Just start doing it, right? And then you're saying like micro doses of purpose. I have the privilege to work a desk at times, but also it's not the privilege because you don't get to interact with normal people in the community all the time. However, what it's afforded me is a smaller dose of that. When I do interact with the community, when I do go on some little call or help some guys out in whatever small way I can, like I feel really like lit up because I was like, yeah, this is the stuff that we like signed up to do, even if it's just like helping someone's day get slightly better. and put a smile on their face. Like I don't have, but I can't require it, or else now I'm creating this gap in expectation and like this
Yeah.
desire, which leads to, not to go super deep right at the end, but like to suffering and the lack of, met expectations. And I love how you talked about adaptation, not prediction, right? We do that as police a lot. Like, oh, who's going to be elected? Who's like what term in this like presidency or this governor or whatever. And what does that mean for local politics and policing? Dude, we don't know. And like to worry about it is like why people, especially kind of like Buddhist circles that I'm learning about, like they highlight how thought is like the enemy and how thought leads to suffering. Because if I think about all these things, I start thinking doom and gloom. What do we do to prepare? I mean, do what you need to do, but roll with it. Like keep adapting. And that is what I've seen as the most resilient people in
Mm.
policing through 2020 and after. Like the people that are just like a little bit of like, it is what it is. We'll do the best we can, but they're able to continue that mantra because they focus on the little controllables, a nod to stoicism, and they just roll with it. Like they don't require needing to know what's going to happen and doom and gloom. Because oftentimes that's just like this, it leads to this sneaky version of like victimhood or villain projection, which is just not helpful clearly to like everything we're talking about, like the whole, quote unquote, the whole, and like the collective society that we're in. Um, Turn it back to you, John, for your thoughts on that, and like maybe we'll wrap it up, and where people can find you and what you want to leave listeners with.
Yeah, just to relate to what you're saying is, expectations are the root of all heartache. And we have each individual has fixed expectations. And when we create that pattern and we don't meet those fixed expectations, our world shatters. And so most of our our ability to be in the present moment is really not there. And so when we can come into the present moment, we really can have this ability to live in the infinite now, which is really a helpful skill. And I fail at it all the time. I'm failing at it right now. I'm thinking
Yeah, me
about what I'm
too.
going to do after this
I'm literally
episode.
like, I told John, I was like, hey, I got to cut off in a couple minutes. So literally, yeah.
So but these things, right? When we highlight them, it really helps bring things into perspective and helps us to look at ourselves, to question ourselves, and these inner guidances really change how we can see life and how we can be more connected to life and relationship to life. So that's all I really wanted to say to relate to what you were saying. But I love talking to you, man. It's really fun conversation. We could have gone for like 3 hours. I was
Easily.
trying to speed through some of the things
I
because I
know.
could have spent like 30 minutes on one topic, but really helpful. I tried to do my best on relating to police officers because I don't live in your world, but I do work with you guys. We understand some things. So I love connecting with you, man. Thank you for having me on. I'm the host of Grab Lives podcast. You guys can check out, me and ET's last episode we did. It was a really good episode. I really appreciate you, man.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's 288 on Blue Grit. But yeah, check out Grab Lives and reach out to John. Hit him up. We'll have to have you back, man. There's a lot of people I'd love to get on here with you. It'd be a fun time.
Yeah, and it has to be like a 2, maybe 3 hour episode.
We'll probably have to do that. We'll probably have to
It
do that
have to
because
be,
it's like we're
man.
just scratching the surface here.
I know, dude. Well,
All
thank you,
right.
brother.
Yeah, appreciate you, man. Thank you for tuning into another episode of Blue Grit Radio. As always, support this community by subscribing, giving us a 5-star review, and following, liking, and sharing posts on Blue Grit Wellness on Instagram. You can reach me there or email me at bluegritwellness@gmail.com. Be well and stay gritty.